Welcome to Journey to True Self. Know thyself. Steps to my true self. Know thyself. I am Primal Light, prepare for the world with the identity I set. Daughter of the Self Supreme, Primal Light. Today, I want to talk about the detrimental ramifications of duality. So, first, let's find out what duality is. What is duality? So, duality is a consequence of the self in unawareness of itself and in unawareness of its life. We exist as non-duality in our pure form and in our pure self. The self and consciousness exist non-duality, indivisible, moving parallel to each other with the void between. The self is aware in awareness of itself and its light. Consciousness is in awareness of itself and its light, and is also in awareness of each other. In duality, consciousness is in unawareness of itself and unawareness of its light. Consciousness is sleeping and consciousness is dreaming. So consciousness, the supreme ego, is sleeping and dreaming of the world, and we have entered into the dream of consciousness. And this is the duality. This is the ramification of duality, the sickness in the mind of consciousness, because consciousness is in unawareness of itself and in unawareness of its life. Because, like I said, consciousness and the self was what? Indivisible. They're indivisible. So if they're ever separated, chaos, mental madness. This is what is happening in our world. This is what's happening in the consciousness, in the minds of all the beings in the world. We have an innateness for madness, for mental sickness. Because the consciousness is in unawareness of itself and unawareness of its life. Because the consciousness and the self is indivisible. This is what happens when it's not in awareness of itself. There's a mental sickness. But many have learned how to calm the mind, how to balance the mind. And only the ones who have learned how to balance and bring the mind to stillness have been the masters of the mind in this dream world. All the other ones of us who have not learned how to bring the mind into stillness and to purify the mind, this is what the sickness escalates. Because the sickness is laying dormant. So if you stay in your mind all the while and never get out of the mind, this is when you get a sickness in the mind. That's why so many people are having mental issues. Because they are not allowing themselves to go into stillness of the mind. You have to get out of the mind. I know in this culture they have been telling us and teaching us that we need to be in the mind, This is very unhealthy. We have to give the mind time to rest and stay in stillness. This is how we purify the mind, and this is how we bring balance to ourselves. And so let's talk about some of the detrimental ramifications of duality, like the mental sickness in all the beings. When you look at the mass school shooting, the raping that goes on, the murder, the violence, the spiritual harm, the hatred, all of these are a ramification of duality, because the self is an unawareness of the self. We do not know who we are, and we do not have awareness to our life. And this is what is the problem in our world. And so, how did we become this way when we don't know who we are? Where we are in such unawareness, this madness. Again, let's say, go back to when the self fractalizes itself, to come into the duality, to explore the duality. When we come into this dream of consciousness, we fragmented ourselves into four selves and our four self consciousness. From each self arises self consciousness. It's self awareness, and the self, they separate and come into the world, exploring the world separately in 8 different ways. We come into the world in a body. We come into the world disembodied. We come into the world visible and invisible. We come into the world as male, and we come into the world as female. So we are in this world exploring in the visible and in the invisible world, right? And we are in unawareness. There is unawareness of the self. And so this is how we became the way that we are. So where do we go from here? How do we heal ourselves? How do we heal the mind? How do we heal our consciousness? By awaking the sleeping self. Because the self is sleeping, obscure beyond consciousness. What we are on the quest, searching and seeking for a God. But do you know where the God is that we are seeking? It's within us, asleep, obscure behind the consciousness, obscure behind our mind. The God that we seek is our great I am self. And it is sleeping. And this is the reason why we are in such unawareness. This is the reason why the other half of ourselves who are exploring the world also in ignorance. And you know what? They are also looking for something. They are looking and seeking their light. But the light is obscure behind the consciousness within themselves. They don't know that. So our self, the primal light self and the self-consciousness self, they're both seeking something, and they're looking outside of themselves for it. When you have to look inside for it. And because of this, they have been tricking us, telling us that we need to give them our life. Yes, if you did not know it, the soul is your light. The soul is your light, and their light is obscure within them, and this is the reason why they want your light. It's a trick. And so it's time to wake up from the sleep and wake up from the dream. You have to wake up the sleeping self, castrate the ego. You have to say that I no longer want to explore this world as an ego, as this character, but I want to explore the world as my real self. This is where we go from here. Where do we go from here? We have to come into awareness of who we are. We have to come into awareness and know that we are the self exploring the world in ignorance, taking on this character, this ego character. And this ego is not real, because the ego arises because the true self is sleeping. Ego arises out of the mind, because the true self is sleeping, and now it's time to wake up the real self, so that the real self can come into awareness and we can move on. Yes, because the self-supreme primal light wants to move from the duality into the non-duality. We only came here to explore this duality for an instant. We came into the duality cosmic consciousness, where the self-supreme primal light built a world into the duality cosmic consciousness. In ignorance and in darkness. This world is built in darkness. And so now she wants to move out of this darkness, to move into the light, where she can build a world in the non-dual cosmic consciousness, build a world in the light. Are you ready to move? Are you ready to castrate this ego and wake up your real self so that you can explore the world no longer in this character, but as the real self? Are you ready to move from this duality into the non-duality? Yes. This is where we go from here. The time is now, because this world is coming to a close, and we must prepare ourselves to move into the non-dual cosmic consciousness. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. I am Primalite, prepared for the world with the identity aspect, daughter of the self-supreme Primalite. I bow to you in love, in life, and in truth. Thank you so much.